Tonight we are actually getting to hear from some amazing individuals from Slack, Urban Innovation Fund, and also Experian Ventures. And this panel will be moderated by none other than Anna Shen, who is actually a journalist and startup advisor that currently writes about tech and innovation for both Huffington Post and Fortune magazine. Please help me welcome Anna, Alex, Jennifer, and May to the stage.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you to the audience and to the wonderful team here at Plug and Play for making this amazing event happen. As we can see, we have a wonderful panel here. But before I start, I'd like to set the scene. Many of us have seen unimaginable changes this past year, ones that we could not have even dreamed of. We have the Me Too movement. We have the Harvey Weinstein story that broke a few months ago, and we have greater recognition that women can really, truly contribute to the economy as well as a lot of these tech companies that are growing. Now, with all of this, we also know that women have a long way to go. And in fact, if you look at McKinsey, a statistic that came out says that if all women globally were able to contribute to the economy, there would be $13 trillion more in the global coffers. So, now, surprising statistic, right? So many of us still face that glass ceiling. And so here we have three wonderful panelists. I'd like them all to introduce themselves, and they're going to talk today about how they got through their obstacles to accomplish their dreams. And we have a token man on the panel who is going to talk about his support of women. So if you could please introduce yourself.
Hi guys, my name's May Somali. I'm an investor at the Urban Innovation Fund, and it's a real pleasure to be here. So thank you, Plug and Play, for this wonderful invitation, and really excited to be part of this FoundHER event. Quick background, I hail from Sydney, Australia, thus the accent. I'm a lawyer turned investor, and I'm really passionate about investing in people and ideas that are changing the future of our cities and society. And a quick fun fact, I love foreign films and puppies, but not necessarily films about puppies.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Miwa. I work at Slack. At Slack, I'm the design studio manager, and that means that I manage all of Slack's international creative projects. I also am a program manager at large, so I work on Salesforce Marketing Cloud projects that cross between analytics, engineering, and marketing. So wear a lot of different hats. My background is I am a New Yorker, but I was actually born in Rwanda, came to the States in the early 90s, lived in a lot of different states, had an opportunity to live in Berlin as well. So I consider myself a global citizen. I'm really happy to be here, and I stand here on the shoulders of all the women and the men have invested in me.
So my name is Alex Marquez. I run the corporate venture program for Experian, based here in the Bay Area. But I've been in corporate venture and venture in general for the better part of the last 18 years or so. I started my career in technology with Intel back in the late 90s, went into corporate venture in 2000, then did that for a good 13 or so years, started my own company, which we subsequently sold a couple years later, and then I went back into corporate venture again for USAA, and now more currently with Experian running their venture program. So I've had sort of the long-running history of having not only invested in startups way back 15 years ago, but more currently in this sort of era around a lot of fintech and insurtech opportunities that we've been looking at. So I'm obviously very pleased to be here, even though I'm the token male on the stage. I hope I don't get too beat up, but I did bring my wife and kids in the audience, so They're two gymnasts, so they'll defend me to some extent. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I would like to do is talk a little bit about the journey of May and Jennifer. You had quite a long way coming from Rwanda and coming from Australia. What I'm most interested in is tell us a little bit about your journey as well as the glass ceiling that you faced and what the pivotal moments were in your career.
So I think interesting starting point is, for me, the glass ceiling is anything that seems to be a barrier that prevents you from going where you want to go. And I think often this is gendered, often it's not. For me, I think there are barriers beyond just being a woman that might have prevented me from getting where I wanted to be. I think also intersectionality is important. So if you're a woman of color or a woman that comes from other kind of minority or disadvantaged backgrounds, that can play a role. I guess a quick story about, for me, what was a really helpful pivot and what helped me so-called break through the glass ceiling and climb the ladder. So I started my career actually early on as a lawyer. As a lawyer in Australia, working in corporate law. I know the stereotype of a corporate lawyer is not pretty. I worked long hours. I loved the law, really loved this idea of solving business challenges for my clients, and had this interesting moment where after first couple of years on the job, I had a performance review, walked in with the managing partner, and she said to me, "May, you're a brilliant lawyer, you're very good with the clients, but what we have a bit of a problem with is you have a bit too much personality. You really love talking to your colleagues, and that's great, but it's a bit distracting. Like, you don't need to always ask them how their weekend was when you come out of the elevator into the office. Time is everything, we need to bill in 6-minute blocks." And that's when I realized that something that I found to be my strength, which was connecting with people, was seen as a weakness. And so one thing that I learned early on was, in that scenario, staying in that firm and trying to get to the top and be promoted was there was a glass ceiling there. And I needed to think about what my impact was going to be in my career. And I realized that the thing I loved most was solving business challenges, but doing that with people, and not just these big entities that I had no interaction with. So I really used the law as a platform in that firm to do a lot of work in our community foundation. So one solution was to use the resources I had within the firm to really hone in on my strengths, which was to work with small companies and small startups and do pro bono work. And then essentially I decided I was going to leave. And when I decided to combine my passion of really working with companies and doing it in a way where personality was invited, I thought, what better place than to go and try and be an investor and consultant with startups. So the journey really began there. I got on a flight. I did grad school in between, but essentially moved countries and thought, let's connect with startups in a way where the skill set that's necessary is that human connection. And for me, doing that alongside, building mentors and alliances and confidants along the way was what helped me break through what seemed to be a really strong ceiling.
Awesome. I think I share a lot of your sentiments around glass ceilings. For me, my story starts in Rwanda. The reason why my family came to America is the conflict that happened in '94. So I've always seen really glass ceilings as any time in your life where you hit a kind of roadblock where it's either you're going to defeat or you're going to go through it. For example, for me, even growing up, having to take ESL classes, for example, and I had one teacher, I remember, and she told me, "I don't really know if you'll ever be a great writer, but I think you could be good." And I remember that moment kind of retreating and telling my mom that. And I remember her telling me, "Well, you're either going to internalize that and become this person who's good enough, or you're going to be a great writer." And I remember working with the teacher and getting out of ESL and like ending up in AP English and, pushing myself in a way that I think a lot of people are told certain things throughout their life, and you either internalize those things that I'm not good enough, or you keep pushing. And in terms of professional settings, if I have to think about a time that's really extremely prevalent, is when I was working. So for me, I actually have a career that spans across a lot of different sectors. I started off actually working in government in New York City in the mayor's office in the Bloomberg administration, working on health and human services portfolios. So these are all the city's most vulnerable populations. Ended up working in philanthropy, and then ended up with a stint. Mind you, my background's in political science and gender studies for undergrad anyway, and actually ended up working in finance for 2.5 years at Bloomberg LP, the company, as a global finance project manager. So you can understand there's probably a lot of a learning curve. And I remember after about 1.5 years on the job, I was 21 or 22 years old, and I was looking for my next opportunity. I told my boss, I want to apply for a Fulbright. And my boss looked at me with such shock. Looked at me and she was like, oh, you want to leave? Instead of looking at it as like, I want to have an opportunity to do more things. I'm 21, 22. You should continuously try to grow and do interesting things. And I remember feeling really deflated and speaking to my mentor at the company and her telling me, you shouldn't only apply for a Fulbright, you should apply to grad school, you should apply to this. She's like, you're amazing, you shouldn't, your journey doesn't stop here. So I think for me, glass ceilings are people or obstacles that you face that tell you you're not good enough, and it's up to you to kind of go through the experience where you keep telling yourself, it's not about me being good enough, it's about me being enough. And by me internalizing that, I can push through all the people and all the things that tell me that because I'm Black, because I'm short, because I'm a woman, because I'm a refugee, I can go on and on a list of things that tell me that I'm not good enough, or people in society or statistics that tell me I shouldn't be in certain rooms or have certain conversations, have certain job titles or certain opportunities. But it's about realizing that people before me, like my parents, or if I look at women and men that I admire, that were told throughout their life that this is a turning point. Either you're going to go forward or you're going to continue to retreat backwards. You're going to push through, or you're going to allow a ceiling to hold you in. So I really like what you said, May, and I really think it's important, especially as women, to constantly think, especially now in this era, how you framed it, to constantly think about people that came before us and how they have pushed us to a point where we're going to continue. So, yeah.
Thank you. So what I'm really hearing is a lot about resilience there. Alex, I think you might be able to speak to that. On a corporate level, there's a lot of initiatives to kind of build up this resilience within the women and the leadership within. So I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about that, as well as the glass ceiling, and does it exist for women, and what do you observe?
Yeah, I would say it does exist. Whether or not it's transparent, translucent, or solid glass, yeah, it's there. I would say, from my perspective, I've been in the industry from tech for the last better part of 20 years or so. There's definitely been a transition that I've seen, and it's in an odd way. Obviously, right now is a very pivotal time in that regard, but I would say that coming from my time in the corporate side of it, more traditional operational corporate, there was, I would say there's a higher percentage of females in the roles that I was in. It became less so as I got into the venture side of it. So the folks that are doing deals on the deal side, whether or not you're a partner at a traditional venture firm, or whether or not you're a partner, an investing partner as part of a corporate venture firm, is a very, very small percentage of females in that role. And then the flip side of that equation, obviously, is the fact that you look at the number of startups or companies founded by female CEOs, it's so minuscule. And I would look back, and we were talking about this earlier on our sort of prep call, if I think back over the years of the thousands and thousands of business plans that I received over the course of like 15 years, single-digit percentage business plans that ever came through my desk with a female founding CEO. And so it was interesting, you look back on it now, I didn't think about it at the time, just because you're looking at deal flow, you're not really deciphering whether or not it's male or female. It was just kind of an interesting thing that why is there so few numbers of female CEOs? And then it kind of goes all the way back to the bigger question I have is, why is there so few women in tech in general? And now, when my daughter's growing up, potentially going down the path of being in a technology field, the question is whether or not I can help them think about how to be successful in this sort of industry. And knowing as a guy, I could provide her some inside information, if you will, some G2, if you will, to try to figure out how to navigate the sort of culture that's a male-dominated society, especially in tech. I don't know if I'll ever come with the answer to that question, but I can definitely give her insight from a perspective how there's that general guy sort of bromance, whatever goes on within a corporate culture or regular culture today, where, you know, men generally get around whether or not they're doing golf together, doing something else together. It's generally 100% guys, right? And there's very few women. So it's just part of that stuff. How did women penetrate that sort of collegial atmosphere?
And also, I think we discussed a little bit about how do you, shout out to your daughters, get them involved early on. What is your suggestion there?
Yeah, so it was interesting because we talked about the fact that I recently had an opening in my group to bring on someone, and we looked through the resumes that came in, the applications, and we had about 200 applicants. And over the 200 applicants, just by screening by name alone, obviously, I estimated about 2% of those were actually females for a director level position in venture. And that to me kind of, the question was, why is there so few women in the funnel? Because it's really hard for me to try to pick from a pool of 98% male and 2% female and try to figure out why is there an imbalance. And so my issue has always been, while I appreciate a lot of the effort in the Valley today to try to write the numbers from a women in tech perspective, so go down the list of the Googles, et cetera, saying they have whatever 30% of their employees are female. The bigger question I have is, you know, trying to solve the problem at the end of the funnel by hiring more women doesn't address what I would call or refer to as the root cause solution, which is how do you get more women interested in tech the day they're born, you know, early on in their life cycle, get exposed to STEM and other programs. And so I've been a bigger fan of trying to figure out the root cause solution, if you will, as opposed to try to just draw more from the limited pool and funnel, because I think that ultimately creates longevity in terms of solving the problem as opposed to just trying to hire more.
And that was to fill a venture capital role, right?
Was to fill a director level venture role.
So May, I think you're the venture capitalist on this panel, so why don't you speak about the state of women in VC, what you're observing, and how did you get in with a non-traditional background?
There's a lot in that question.
I put three together.
No, all good. I guess I'll start off quickly. The way I got in was non-traditional, right? So I was told, May, you're crazy, you can't go and work in venture, you're a corporate lawyer, maybe you could do startup law, that's good enough, maybe. I wasn't interested in startup law, I really wanted to do the business side. So what I did was, look, I think pivoting, you can't pivot everything at once, so you can't pivot geography, role, and industry all at once. What you can pivot is maybe one or two at a time, and then do another tweak afterwards. So I really pivoted the piece of geography and maybe role, and I ended up working kind of in policy and law still. I did my master's in that area and focused a bit on tech policy, and then use that as a platform to reach out to accelerators that were working on kind of investing in companies that are working in highly regulated industries like transportation, housing, education, finance, and that brought my two worlds together. And that was a way for me to then have a unique value proposition to a fund, the Urban Innovation Fund, which is really a traditional VC but focused on startups that are shaping the future of cities. And by definition, these startups are working with government in and around policy and regulation, and I could put that skill set forward. So what was initially, I thought, a waste of 2 years in a corporate law firm ended up being something that I could bring into the equation when putting myself forward and kind of augmenting that with some training on the ground with accelerators and volunteering my time with startups while I was at grad school.
So what I'm hearing is that sometimes you think that you're taking a backward step, but it serves you in the future?
Absolutely. I think it's only a backward step if you have nothing that you learnt from it. And often the best mistakes are the ones that we make early on and can learn from going forward. In terms of, I guess, the question around women and venture capital, as you mentioned kind of at the beginning, there's a lot happening right now broadly across all professions when it comes to the role of women and the role of gender and diversity. And I think that in venture we have a number of different dynamics happening. So the first is that for the first time ever, frankly, we have more capital out there going to more founders than ever before. We've got a proliferation of seed stage funds, we've got accelerators, we've got crowdfunding, we've got all these amazing tools that were never available before. And what that means is that an idea can now get off the ground more cheaply, more quickly, and in a way that could never before. The problem is, though, that most of this money is going to people that look and talk the same. And we don't have enough women in the fold. So in terms of that piece, I think one thing that we see is that more and more venture firms are popping up that are women-led. I think the work of amazing people out there like Eileen Lee with Cowboy Ventures, Aspect Ventures, Julie and Clara, who started the Urban Innovation Fund and who I'm grateful to, who gave me a job. We need more women starting venture firms, but we also need more founders who are building relationships with a variety of people in the ecosystem from day one. Because getting funding is more than just a simple pitch. It's about relationship building. And so I think that one of the biggest success stories I've seen with founders who are able to access capital where others can't is that they're able to bring their unique and diverse skill sets and make it explicit from the start, but do that through building a relationship. Any good venture fund will recognize that to have diverse deal flow is a really good thing. Venture firms are, by definition, trying to find outliers, those $100 million, billion-dollar companies. If we're all investing in people that look and talk and create the same, then that's not good for the fund. And so we are constantly, as a fund, and I think as an industry, trying to think, how do we broaden the top of the funnel? How do we go to more diverse events? How are we creating networks to enable women to come out here and pitch? Amazing work that's been being done by organizations such as the Expat Women, who have their female founders pitch female funders events. Project Include, that Ellen Powell and her crew started, that is amazing. And I encourage you to look at it online for all the investors and founders out there, where there's amazing resources about how to tackle problems of diversity inclusion. And I think sexual harassment is another issue that's really rampant in the industry. And part of this, I feel, is because although we're professional services firms, there's very little boundaries between the personal and professional in venture and in startup land. And so we need more thoughtfulness going into how we're interacting with one another, and when we've crossed the line of feeling comfortable and speaking up about it and having each other's backs. And so a lot of firms are moving into putting codes of conduct into place and encouraging each other to do the same. And so I think there's a lot to still do in the industry, but as a result of brave founders speaking up, brave investors taking the first step, I think we're moving in the right direction. And I encourage you all to help each other and to reach out to people that might be able to help you. And for all the female founders in the audience to, come out and speak to the female investor on the panel or the male investor on the panel and put yourself out there.
Great, thank you so much. Alex, do you have Alex, you've been on both sides of the corporate and startup. Do you have anything to add here?
I think the point I think that I like there was you have to put more diversity into the top of the funnel. For me, that's what I was trying to say, is that for me is trying to get to the root cause solution. How do you get more diversity into the top of the funnel? Because the only way that you're going to increase success and increase the penetration rate and the percentage rate of successful female founders is to inject a lot more female founders and female founded businesses into the top of the funnel, because success begets success. And I think you have to get that cycle going. The issue is the cycle will take many, 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 many years to produce success. And so you do not expect it to happen overnight, but you got to start someplace.
Speak to that point as well. I think that it's really important what happens at the start of a lot of these companies. For example, if you start a company with a lot more diversity, it's a lot easier to continue that trend. If you wait until things get big and then you start tackling issues of diversity, it's already too late. For example, if you tapped into my network, I would have more people in my network that looked like me. It's statistically proven, and if you tapped other people's network, there are more people that look and talk and come from the same socioeconomic background as you start to look at certain demographics. So I find that companies that and venture capital firms, what have you, that tackle this issue from the beginning are a lot more successful in the long run than those that make it an issue before things get too big. And
if I can piggyback off that, I mean, I absolutely agree with that. If your first 20 hires don't have a woman on there or a person of color, and I'm not talking tokenistic, something is wrong, and it's much harder to change that once the culture is built. And I think all of us should kind of question that if the visuals don't look right. I agree also that kind of everyone has a responsibility to play, and really interesting development. I don't know if for those of you who might have read the New York Times piece that came out a couple days ago, kind of piggybacking off the inclusion rider clause that in Hollywood they're pushing and was talked about at the Oscars, for startups that are now only accepting venture money from funds that have at least one female that can write that check on the funds. And I know that sounds strange because there's an imbalance of power, and startups want money from anywhere, but if enough startups do that and enough funds are missing out on the best deals, then something's got to change. So there's interesting and creative ways to tackle the problem.
And are there any other ways, I think, Alex, this would be speaking to your experience, since you've seen so many startups grow and you've seen them probably grow to the corporate level, what other initiatives have you seen that are working?
I mean, there's a lot of programs that have gone out in the last couple of years around creating diversity funds. A lot of groups do that specifically. I think that's a good place to start. I don't know if there's any, there's other places to go in terms of adding the rider clause. There's other ways to do it in terms of bringing on a more diverse partnership and what have you. I don't think you can do it as a forcing function, though. I think it has to be part of that. You have to build a good team, and you have to find the folks to be able to source great deals, because at the end of the day, your LPs will really care about the fact that you either generate returns or you don't. But the LPs tend to be endowments or corporate institutions, so they do have a social awareness. So they also want to drive it from the opposite angle to put, force more diversity on the venture partnership as well. So I think there's a myriad of ways, if you will, in order to tackle this problem. But I think there shouldn't be any shortage of them, right? So whether or not you change it from the LP perspective, whether or not you change it from the partnership diversity perspective, or whether or not you change it by creating diversity-specific funds, I don't really care. I think the ultimate goal here is to just create some change.
Okay, great. What I would love to do is get some questions from the audience. No questions. I think we're going to get a mic in 1 second. Hold on just 1 second. Oh, sorry. Pay attention.
Hi. Whoa. Do I need to stand somewhere else? No? Okay. Turn more towards me? Okay, thanks. So you mentioned a statistic in the very beginning about something like $13 trillion more would be created in the world if women could fully economically participate. And something that I'm just always curious about, particularly in technology, and particularly with like what Alex was saying about how do we get more females in, how do we get more girls in. Women already do a lot of work in our world. And most of it is caretaking, and most of it is already undervalued and not economically valued. And so I'm curious, as we continue this conversation, how do we actually make sure that we're not glorifying tech, and make sure that we continue to look at the work of caretaking and work that has traditionally been women's work as an economically valued part of our society? And can we use technology to actually help serve that focus?
I would like to speak to that. So for me, I went to women's college. So I'm a really proud graduate of a women's undergraduate program. And your question is something that we would discuss a lot in my courses about women in the workforce. And what I really think it's really a cultural shift. And I think part of the things that are happening now is there's a lot more dialogue about that, which is not just concentrating so much on these sectors that bring in a lot of money, but also realizing that there are so many elements to economic advancement, and there are so many like what they call pink collar jobs, right? Or even if you think about the fact that years ago being a pediatrician was like a male dominated field in medicine, and now it's mostly women actually who do their residencies and become pediatricians, and now it's a lot less paid. It's like one of the doctors that actually don't make that much money. So it's very interesting because there's also this thing that once women start to enter certain fields as well, these like fields that are predominantly seen as extremely economically like viable and glamorous, they start to decrease in value. So I think it's really about having a broader conversation about cultural shifts. I think it's really also about continuously, no matter what room you're in, if you're able to kind of applaud someone for their work. I see a lot of times, for example, women doing a work on projects and then only the male counterpart getting like all of the attention. So it's just little things like that. Because what you're talking about is not just about caretaker versus tech, it's just about people getting the acknowledgement that they deserve. And then also, if you're in a room or in a certain setting and you see something happening where someone is being devalued, like speaking up. So, or undervalued, like speaking up. So it's like, it's cultural and little things that you can do that can actually inform and shape a better and bigger conversation.
So I think it comes back to the unit of the family, and when we talk about equality and change, we can't just think about organizations and society. We need to start with ourselves, and then we need to start with our family units and our communities and our organizations, and questions of how we value time and work should be had in our families and also at work. And I think seeing there's often a divergence between caretaking roles and tech, there shouldn't be. And I think there's often opportunities for technology to enhance caretaking roles and provide, or maybe free up time. There's amazing startups out there that are helping women get back into the workplace by allowing them to, for example, if they go on business trips, ship their breast milk back home, to not allow that to be a barrier, or to help with other tasks around the home if they choose to use them. And so there are interesting ways where you can bring the two together as well, and thinking, again, creatively is really, really important. But going back to the family unit is key.
Okay, next question.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Anita Gardine. I'm the CEO of Oniva, and I actually solved that problem, so I'll talk about that later. But I have to say, I started in engineering at AT&T in 1980, and it is absolutely the best time ever to be a black female founder in tech. So we've got a ways to go, but we have to acknowledge that progress. I will also stand here and say I am a product of affirmative action. I started to go to Berkeley at 15, and by the time I finished at 25, I was at Bell Labs doing design, and it was a function of those kinds of programs. Are we at a point now where we need to look at external regulation to help VCs make different resource allocation decisions? Because I think we all know it's not a pipeline issue. I'm a member of a group called Hidden Figures. I'm the 11th black female to raise over $1 million in this country. And thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm 11th. I think we're up to maybe 20, right? We're up to maybe 20. And all this comes as we have crowdfunding, as we have more female VCs, as women of color, as you spoke to. I'm more likely to be struck by lightning, right? Than I am to receive an institutional investment. Joking aside, right? That is the reality. So are we at a point where we need to look for external regulation to help result in different outcomes? Because as you said, it takes a long time, but I was told that in 1980, and it's 2018, and I am 55. I can't wait. I'm going without you. So what's the fix?
You're a former lawyer.
Look, given that I'm no longer a lawyer, I don't think law is the solution. No, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point. So there's a lot of contextual and external changes happening within the broader society that's allowing for these opportunities. I think having 20 black women receive $1 million is still not enough, given how many deals are being done a year. So in terms of what needs to change, law is always one part of the solution. It needs to exist as a hard line, but I think a lot of it is the cultural changes that we can instill. And a couple of the most effective interventions, I think, is a lot of these aggressions are microaggressions that happen every day, and they're because of unconscious biases that happen. And so sometimes we don't even realize we're making decisions that are biased against women or against the person that's short or tall or is a former lawyer. And so being able to have training around what are our biases, how do we tackle them, and make them explicit. For example, sometimes I'll go into an investment decision-making meeting with my partners and say, look, really loved the company, the founder really annoyed me, and I don't know if I'm being biased because they talked really fast, and I hate people that talk too fast. But I think the company's good, and I think I might just be being biased, so can we have a second meeting with them? And being aware of your biases like that, making them explicit, putting them on the table, inviting other opinions is a really effective intervention. I think when it comes to some of the other structural barriers like sexual harassment that are rampant, we do need training and we need cultural change, and some of that has to come through law, but it also comes through training and through leaders recognizing that bringing in experts to run workshops, to work with companies on a long-term basis can help. Because a lot of the time, women walk away from venture or from running their own company not because of not being able to raise that $1 million that they need, but because of all the little barriers along the way that they face, or all the kind of harassment they face along the way that they decide is, enough is enough. And so changing those things, I think we can do without law, but through cultural changes.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think if you follow the money, let's start with the follow the money conversation, right? Venture firms raise capital from LPs. LPs tend to be the institutions or high net worths or corporations. They are the ones that get embarrassed the most if the way they're deploying their capital is not sort of in the public eyes properly done. So I think outside the law issue, the legal issue, I think if you follow the money and you put pressure on that end of the funnel, I think you'll force change by default. To the comment about, and I was joking about the legal opinion, but I don't know if that's the right answer. I always get fearful if you force it from a legality perspective, the opposite effect ends up happening, and the people on the opposite end of that equation get really offended by it, right? So I don't know. That's what I'm saying. It's an interesting debate. I've never thought about it from a legality perspective, but I think about it from the follow the money from an LP to a GP in a partnership.
I think there was a question over here.
I was kind of hesitant to ask a question because there's a million thoughts that's going through my head while I'm hearing every one of you speaking, and so much to ask and stuff that I don't even know if there is an answer to. First, I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you're saying, because it validates a lot of things that I've been experiencing, but society kind of like shuts it down, and we're not really allowed to talk about it, and it feels like if we say anything, then it gets frowned upon because we're complaining because we're women and we complain. But to get to my question, I wanted to ask if you've experienced a case, something that you can really pinpoint, where you saw that a female was not getting the credit that she deserved, and it was pointed out and it was treated in a way that you thought was right. Because I'm dealing with that type of situation on a daily basis, pretty much, and with other situations as well. And I feel like even if I try to manage it properly, it's still very hard to be in that situation and move the needle even slightly. So have you experienced, or have you found a solution or semi-solution?
I'll give you a real life example, minus the people's names to protect them, I guess. So I don't have an answer specifically to how to address that question. I'll tell you what I have seen through sort of corporate culture. And the example that I used on the phone call with my colleagues up here was, when you look at some of the behaviors of male senior executives in a lot of the corporations I've been part of and been exposed to, you'll get the entire spectrum of personalities, right? You'll get some, and sorry, but I'm gonna curse. You'll get some guys that are real a-holes, and they're very successful. And the rest of the guys who know them and work with them, they realize, well, they're successful because they are very abrasive, aggressive a-holes. If you take that, and I've seen it, and a female does the exact same thing and is aggressive and goes after the exact same outcome, they're not they're considered really a bad person just because the personality of Mrs. Now is a female who's super aggressive. It just scares every single guy in the room, and they just kind of shun them. So, I definitely see it. I would say that I got real life exposure to it. It was about 10 years ago, and it kind of changed my thinking about, if I just replace all these really a-hole-ish guys I've worked with in the past and put a female in that place, would I have that same perception? And it was surprising that, sometimes I do recall her being a real pain in the ass to deal with. But the reality is they're acting no different than a guy. But the problem is that the guys in the corporation tend to treat them, ridiculously different, and it's very unfair. So, I don't know if that answered your question, the specific question, problem you had, but I've seen it. My hope is that as I go through the latter part of my career here, as my daughters go up through potentially large corporations, especially in the technology field, that I help them to try to figure out not to be sort of perceived that way, but still try to be successful in an organization. And it sucks. I mean, the reality is it sucks.
I think that one practice that I really appreciate for my male allies, when I lived in Berlin, I worked for extremely big technology conference, like 20,000 attendees, over 600 speakers from all over the world. And our founder, CEO, was this amazing German dude who's still one of my mentors and just a great person through and through. And what he would do is when we'd have meetings with like Red Bull or with like Airbnb or partnerships, he would always make like me speak first or women speak first. And every time someone would circle back to him he would make this like a conscious effort. Like someone would say, "Oh, that was really great." We said, "I didn't say that. She said that. I didn't do that. She did that." Like he would throughout the meeting, like drill it into people's heads that he works. The other people that founded the conference were 3 other women. And if there's another woman in the room, he would literally make it his business to let us speak first, us take the credit, and he was just more in the background. Because he's like, I don't have anything to prove. I'm a white man. They're going to respect me anyway. I don't need accolades. I don't need someone to be like, wow, that's really great what you did. I've been hearing that all my life. It's fine. I can let someone else take the credit, especially because they did the work. So just really being cautious, especially if you're a male and you're an ally to these causes, it's really like sitting down and thinking about every meeting, what can I have done to empower someone else in the room?
I'll use a quick... We need more people like that out there, that's for sure. Quick example, so I think calling out behavior that I think a lot of people intend well, but our actions are often inconsistent with our intentions. And so what I found is, particularly in our interactions with funders and board members and entrepreneurs, we might say comments here and there that we don't mean to offend or to stereotype, but they do. And I was in a board meeting, and essentially I was observing a board meeting, and the board meeting, male board member was deciding the salary of the female CEO. And in the discussions of the female CEO, it was discussed that she was fantastic. She was meeting all the milestones, hitting the KPIs, doing a fantastic job of growing the company. So naturally, you'd assume the compensation would be, reflecting that. And it came down that the board member said, well, look, we're a bit cash strapped, so we'll cut her salary because, her husband makes a lot of money, and so they'll be fine. It's like, we'll just do this for a year. And a comment was made that, is your salary based on your wife's salary? As a male board member, do they look at how much your wife is making? And he's like, oh gosh, no. And that's when he realized that comment is actually completely not acceptable, but he'd never been framed it like that. And kind of bringing people along on the journey, because they're often allies and they want to be, but reframing it in that moment to make people realize, oh, maybe that's not a great comment to make. And I think those examples exist everywhere, but often the way we deal with them is to ignore it in real time. But often in real time, if we respond, we can have a lot of impact. Because that person will probably become a huge ally going forward and be super aware of never to make such a comment again.
Well, great answers. We just have time for one more question, and it's going to come from me. Oh, is there one more? Okay, we have time for one more. Great. Thought we were out of time.
Thank you very much, Jackie Hernandez. And
I was just going to say before we do, you guys, this is one event. Hi, I'm Hadia, I work marketing. Hashtag break the glass. We have Twitter, we have a Facebook, we have a LinkedIn, Instagram. Continue the conversation. This is a 7-part series. We're going to have more events. We want to hear from you, so please don't be shy and don't troll us. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jackie Hernandez, Plug and Play. Thank you very much for being here, and especially for everybody that is being here. And I want to reflect a little bit on Jennifer's comment at the beginning. And this is a little bit about the glass ceiling that we have to break. And we are all reflecting about the external factors that we have to deal with. And Laura was just mentioning even one of our speakers that couldn't make it because literally she's being induced in labor. And so, which are the things that we have to deal with every day. And so that's the way it works, right? And so Candace had to leave early because she has to put her daughter to bed, et cetera, et cetera. So, but there are some other things that we haven't put into consideration that we should. And most of the times, the glass ceilings are ceilings that we're putting ourselves in the way we do it. Alex had that case that not many women apply to the position of director, but yet he has the bravery to bring his daughters to an event like this so that they listen and they put themselves the glass ceiling. There's Jeff somewhere there that is also another investor that he brought his daughter to come here. And so I guess, in my opinion, and I'd like to hear also your opinion, because those are the things that we need to do instead. I mean, we can focus 30 hours here and spend our life discussing the external factors that are happening because they are real, of course. But there is a number of other things that we can do in order to exercise the change. And those are the things that just go for it. And just to train this new generation, our daughters, our sisters, our little or younger peers, and I'm on the older side, and so the younger peers, to really come and just come forward and apply for those engineering roles and apply for those director roles whenever you have the opportunity, and go get it. And so you have supported parents, you have supportive brothers or a great COO, et cetera. And so I think it is a mix of both, and we have to be a little bit more proactive on our side. Give me your thoughts.
Is there a question? Well, I love what you said, so if I may chime in here. And one thing that I really love is a movie that I saw, which is called Suffragette. I'm sure nobody has watched it. Very few, at least whenever I ask anyone. It's with Meryl Streep, and it's about the suffragette movement in England, which was 1 year before the US suffragette movement. And it's interesting because I think we've forgotten what that looks like and where women have come from. And really what I saw in that movie is nobody's going to ask for it if we don't ask for it as women. And so your point is very well taken.
I really like your point as well. And, you know, I think that a lot of times a glass ceiling is also something that you internalize. Like I say a lot of times, if you tell yourself every day, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I don't articulate myself well, I don't look good, all these things, and you carry that inside of you, you can't, and someone else then comes along and tells you the same things, and you internalize both of those things, how are you ever going to get to any other step? I mean, I think a lot about women, especially with all these amazing things that you're talking about, like the movie and like even like Hidden Figures. These are women that had to tell themselves, no, I'm good enough. No, I deserve to be there. I don't like taking everything that society is saying and flipping it and internalizing something else when you have no other example around you of people doing what you want to do, having to be the first in so many ways. I think it's super important after you get to a point in yourself where you have self-confidence to give it to another woman, especially ones that are younger than you. Like I have a cousin and she's a mechanical engineer. My younger cousin, she's a hero of mine even though she's way younger than me. And now she's doing a coding camp and she wants to become a growth engineer one day. And just knowing that when I talk about myself and she hears that. So if I'm saying that I'm not smart or I'm not good enough, like she hears that and she'll internalize that. But if I speak confidently about myself, it's gonna help her look at herself in a better way too as a young Black woman. So I'm very conscious about when I get in front of people who are younger than me, how I talk about myself, because I know that they internalize the same things. So I think a lot of times a glass ceiling is something that, I'm not saying it's in your head, but it starts from within. It's almost having the confidence of like a tall, white, blonde male. Like, I am good enough. I own this room. I walk into some rooms and I don't see anyone who looks like me. I have to put it on. Sometimes you have to fake confidence until you actually feel it. Like, and that's what a lot of women have to do throughout history. So, yeah, I really like your point.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, I will add to that you know, I've had to hire a couple people over my career, and I've always said that I will hire energy first over anything, because I can teach the rest of it, in my opinion. And I think to that point, you can come out of Stanford, you can be a stereotypical white guy that comes out of Stanford, that's fine and great. I will hire the person who has a lot more energy and drive, because I can figure that that person at the end of the day is not gonna give up. They've probably worked harder to get to where they're at, and they may have a lot more energy and drive behind them. You look at myself, and I'll just put it out there, right? I didn't come from Stanford. I came from a low-ranked university in Las Vegas. We had a great basketball team for a year or two, but outside of that, there was no double E students coming out of there starting, oh yeah, that's true. So we're known for things other than graduating top engineers. But that being said, and I made my way into Purdue and I made my way into Intel, and I just I knew at the end of the day where I wanted to go, and certainly I would come into meetings and I was standing out for different reasons, whether or not I heard the comment about being short twice up here. I don't know why that applies to me, but it does. But also, my last name is Marquez, and the jokes used to be made when I wanted to get into venture. I had friends who would say, you do realize how many other Marquezes there are in venture capital? And they're like, there's 0. So yeah, when you start looking at it, it's like, yeah, but that's what I want to do. And so you figure, I'll pay again for anyone who has energy and drive to go get there. So I love your point, because if you can find that person, come hell or high water, they're going to get there. And that's the person I want to back, and that's the same qualities and traits and characteristics I look for in entrepreneurs. They know they may be the underdog, but that's what I love about them. They have the most fight and the most bite in them, and so that's what I would chase.
And one last comment, I guess, that I want to end with, and that's something that's been super important in my own career and that I try and do every day, is each of us are an invaluable resource, because within each human being is a potential to be a mentor and a mentee. And those two capacities and roles are what can change a lot of what we've talked about today. And mentors don't need to look or talk or feel a certain way. They don't necessarily need to be women. They can be. They don't even have to be in your same industry. And there's a really interesting framework for thinking about mentors, that you don't need one person to play every role. Having a personal board of advisors that can walk with you through different parts of your journey professionally is the most important thing. And that might be someone that is your taskmaster that makes sure you get things done. One is the voice that is building confidence in you and tells you, no, you can do it. I'm going to force you on the stage. You're going to go and do that, even if it scares you. Another person might be someone that listens, that can empathize, that can hear your fears. And so no one person is going to give you all the answers, but also none of us are going to be all the answers to any other person. But we can do one of those roles for someone. And so, I think that we should all practice what we preach, and we can all build into our calendar time to hopefully help those around us within our organization, within our families and communities. I absolutely take that role very seriously and build into my calendar a few hours a week where I'll get on the phone and talk to women that want to get into venture, or talk to founders who I would never fund because they're not in the urban space, but who have never done this before and want some tips. And hopefully, if we all do this, then something's going to change.
Wow, we are out of time. This has been such a rich dialogue. There's so many questions that we have left to grapple with, so many inspirational stories and knowledge to share. I'd like to thank all of our panelists today. And just as Hadia said, there is a hashtag. We would love to continue the conversation. There's 5 more conversations going on in this series, so we look forward to more.